Welcome to Women in the Music Industry, the podcast that shines a spotlight on the remarkable women who are breaking barriers and making their mark in an industry that has long been dominated by men. I'm your host, Rob Wells, and I'm thrilled to have you join us on this empowering journey. Each episode of this podcast will be dedicated to exploring the inspiring stories, accomplishments, and struggles of the extraordinary women who have defied the odds and made waves in the music business. Together, we'll delve into the journeys of female artists, songwriters, producers, musicians, managers, executives, and all those who have helped play a pivotal role behind the scenes. We'll uncover the stories that deserve to be heard, as well as celebrate the triumphs, challenges, and unique perspectives that women bring to the music industry. Whether you're a fan of music, an aspiring artist, or simply curious about the inner workings of the music business, this podcast will offer a valuable perspective. Together, we'll celebrate the power of music and the strength of these inspiring women. So join us as we amplify their voices and together pave the way for a future where women in the music business are no longer the exception, but the rule. Today's podcast is sponsored by the Songwriter's Piano, an easy-to-use app for songwriters and lyricists to use when coming up with song ideas when there's no instrument around or nobody to play one. With the Songwriter's Piano, one can easily play commonly used pop songwriting chord sequences at the touch of a screen, in any key, in 3 different chord variations, all played on a gorgeously recorded grand piano. Download the Songwriter's Piano by Play Like Me apps today, found on both iOS and Android stores everywhere. Welcome everyone to another episode of Women in the Music Industry. For those of you who are joining us for the first time, come on in, grab a seat, and stay for a while. For those of you who have been here before, welcome back. Our next guest is an absolute legend in the music business and a dear, sweet friend of mine for close to 20 years. Suzan Koç is a music publisher and songwriting coach who specializes in helping songwriters find their unique voice. With her characteristic bluntness and gift for understanding exactly what a song needs to have maximum emotional impact, she has developed and mentored successful songwriters for over 30 years. Her career in the music industry started as an intern at Warner Chappell in Paris in 1989 after meeting Nesuhi Ertegun, co-founder of Atlantic Records with his brother, the legendary Ahmet Ertegun. In 7 years, she worked her way up to be the director of international creative and signed this small, maybe slightly unknown rising Swedish pop group, Ace of Base, which went on to sell 50 million records worldwide. No small feat. Wow. In 1996, she moved to New York, where she was VP of Creative for Hit and Run Music, which included artists such as Phil Collins and Genesis. It is there that she met songwriter Shelly Peiken, who wrote the #1 Christina Aguilera smash hit, What a Girl Wants, and the #2 smash hit, Bitch by Meredith Brooks, and landed cuts with Reba McEntire, Brandy, and NSYNC. Suzan then became the VP of Writer Development at BMG Music Publishing in 2001. Wow. I feel like I'm on a wild roller coaster ride. There's more. Since 2008, she has mentored songwriters through individual online workshops at www.suzankoch.com. Notable alumni include Milk, spelled M-I-L-C-K, whose song Quiet was the anthem of the 2017 Women's March and garnered 15 million views in 48 hours. Wow. She also teaches music publishing, songwriting, and creativity classes at UCLA Extension and Musicians Institute. Suzan Koç, we are not worthy to have you here, but thank you for being here. How are you? Great to see you.
Great to see you. Great to see you.
I'm trying to think of the last time that we actually did physically see each other with our own eyes. It's got to be 10 years.
At least.
Coming up to there. Time flies. But there was a while where we were seeing each other quite often.
Well, you were coming to LA quite often.
Yes, I know. And then things change, and then the ability to work online became so much easier and easier. And then my travel days kind of, they didn't grind to a halt, but it's definitely working online has taken over a lot of things. And it's it's a lot nicer, I find, to sleep in your own bed every night. I quite enjoy that.
It's true, but we kind of lose connection. Although when we're here, even on screen, I'm like, oh my God, it's so good to see you. Thank you for having me. And thank you for doing this. This is a great platform for people, not just women, but for people to see that actually women do exist in the music business. I have a feeling there are more than you think, but it's great that you're doing this. So thank you for giving us an extra voice.
Yes,
extra
absolutely.
Outlet.
Absolutely. It's my pleasure. Thank you for saying that. I do want those numbers to be more. So I'm hoping that the numbers that I've been told are incorrect. I do know, however, I teach once a week at this school in Toronto called the Harris Institute. And every class that begins every 4 months, there's a new semester, a new class that comes in. And I'm always saying, please have more female presence within this class. Please, please, please. And my last one was great because there were 4 out of 12 that were there. But the majority of the classes that I'm going into have none. And if I'm lucky, have 1. And I don't know quite what happens. I went to a school, the Performing Arts for high school, for my last year of high school. And in that school, it was 90% female and 10% male, which is great when you're in high school and you're a male. It's a great ratio. But then you get out into the industry and it just doesn't seem to be that way. And when you go into a music studio, it just seems very male dominated. And a lot of my dealings in the music industry have just seemed to be very heavily male dominated. But I do know a ton of amazing women that are in the industry, and that's kind of what I'm trying to do here with the podcast, is just to show not just artists, but show that there's so many different career paths and avenues that anyone could go down. Really open up the eyes to people around the world that think that the music industry is only just performing on stage. So just to, really sort of open it up to everybody out there to see that there's a possibility of having a great career in the music industry.
It's there. You've got to want it. I mean, it's true that I've always been the minority, but music publishing is a little more female heavy. I'm saying that, and then when you go to the Billboard Top 100 Power Players, I think in the top 10 there's one woman's, Jody Gerson, publisher. And there aren't that many. I don't know that it is the industry's fault. I think it's also a lot of BS a lot of women don't want to put up with. And also, I mean, there are things that come up on a daily basis of being a hostile work environment. I've got to be able to survive that. I don't think it's true anymore, but I also know a lot of women who self-produce who will never call themselves producers. There's also
Really?
that, yes. There's an artist I'm working with who couldn't find a producer to work with because they basically spent too much time telling her why her ideas were bad. And she was like, I had to produce myself because they wouldn't listen to me. And they tried to bulldoze me, and I know exactly what I want. And she's very soft-spoken and very sweet girl, but she's not a pushover. So she eventually was like, thank you for your input, but I really hear something in my head. So she did it. Ask her today if she'll call herself producer. She'll say, no, I produced out of desperation. And her song, She Was Nobody, got like over 100,000 listens on Spotify, because it's good. Is it like perfect? No. But any guy, the second you produce something, you're like, I'm a producer. Whereas girls tend to want things to be perfect, etc., before calling them that. There's also that issue that is a female personality trait. We kind of want to prove ourselves before we call ourselves. And guys are smarter. You're like, hey, did I produce? Yes, therefore I'm a producer. And they're right. I'm not saying that it's unfair, but women need to learn a little bit of that too, and not say, oh, I need to prove myself before I call myself. You're like, no, call yourself. They'll fake it till you make it. And it's not even faking it because she genuinely produced and it sounds good. But yes, there are more men than women in this industry.
I would like to do my part to help make it 50-50 if we can. I would just love that ratio. I'd love there to be studios that are completely run by women. I'd love safe spaces where female artists can feel like they can go into a studio and not have any weirdness at all at 3 a.m. when they're trying to create music. All of these things is just that's the future I'm hoping for. So hopefully little things like this podcast and other great things that people are doing will change that going forward. While I have you, I mean, I know you. We have hung out so many times. We have had some crazy things happen, including an insane trip to a sushi restaurant, which I don't know if we should even mention on this podcast, but it was a very, very extreme situation of eating some very experimental food at a sushi restaurant. Anyways, that's about all that I'll mention about that. But when I read your bio, there are so many things in here that you have done that you have never once mentioned to me. And I know you are so sweet. You are so humble. But I also know you're incredibly hardworking, but it's just, I was just like completely shocked over so many things that were in this bio. And I'd love to I want to know more. I want to know more about how you got started. I want to know where you're from, your parents, if they were musical, like just all of that stuff. If you can just take me back to the very beginning and take me up to where you are now, if that's all right.
Wow, of course. But I'm old. It's going to take a while.
You've got time. You're not old. Please stop.
I basically, my mom was in the music business. She's a songwriter. She was also a journalist for a magazine called Cashbox Magazine. That was kind of a competitor to Billboard magazine in the 70s and 80s. And she was their European correspondent. And every year she would go to a conference called MIDEM, which is south of France. And that's where we lived. We lived in Paris. So, and every year she'd come back with records because those were the times. Mm-hmm. And I just loved it. I just loved listening to music. I slept with the radio on. I just was a big music consumer and never, ever had any inclining to create music myself. I just didn't have the patience to the sucky thing I would do. I just wanted to hear great music. Mm-hmm. So my brother is a musician. He can pick up any instrument and figure it out in no time. But I had no interest in playing myself, but I just loved listening to songs and mainly radio. So one year she came back from MIDEM and she had this like Norwegian band. It's funny. It's like me and the Scandinavians. Now, and honestly, it was kind of the ancestor of the boy band. It was, but they were all playing. They were in a band. I was like, oh, Mom, this is really cool. You should manage them. You should do something, whatever. I wasn't really clear on what she did either. I was 15 and she said, you do it. And I was like, challenge accepted. So I started calling up her friends. And I was like, hey, there's this band I really like. What do I do? And a 15-year-old who asks questions, you take the time, you sit them down, you tell them what is what and all that. So I was told I needed to call the Norwegians and get a contract to rep the band. I called them, and of course they were like, can I talk to your mom? They were like, is she serious? They're like, yeah, she's serious. So I had the right to shop the thing. And then I started going to labels. So I'd go to a label would give me the name of another label, an A&R. So basically the third place I went to, which was Polydor, I got the record licensed for France.
Wow. At the age of 15, going into
I was 15. I was like, easy. This is the easiest job in the world. Little did I know the famous beginner's luck. And I was like, okay. And at 15, I was like, that's what I want to do. That's the industry I want to be in.
Find a band that you love and shop that band to labels and get them a deal.
Your third meeting, you get them a deal.
Right. Easy peasy. Right.
Easy. So, and then everything unraveled. The A&R who signed it got fired. The new A&R didn't like it. We had a few radio air, but it didn't happen. But I was like, hey, I did my job. The fact that it flops is not, I mean, it's on me because it's better to have a hit. But I was like, I did my job. The following year, that Norwegian label actually took me to meet them. They paid for me to go to meet them. I was 16. They were like, hey, it's kind of a mascot thing. And they paid me to work there. And then I was meeting people. I was basically in the flow. That was a lot of fun. And that's what I want to do. And then every year I went back to meet them. It was in France. It was easy. And that's where one year I cold called Nesuhi Ertegun's room at the Carlton because Ahmet didn't come. Nesuhi came to meet them every year. Cold called and said, hey, you know what? I'm Turkish. I'm 16. I've done this. Can we meet? Again, it's like at 16, everybody is like, you're this like curiosity piece. So they're like, sure. So I went up, I met with them, and I was like, listen, I'm like going to go to college. After college, can I reach out? Would you like be kind enough to write me a recommendation letter? And he was like, sure. He's like, you seem interesting. You seem like you're doing it and you're a go-getter. So that's how it's happened. Honestly, it's not. And then after school, Nesuhi sent a letter. I sent resumes everywhere. I had to sit by a freaking physical phone for 2 months. Physical phone, because we didn't have those.
Right. That's right.
So I was home waiting, depressed for 2 months. And then I got a call from Warner Chappell. Warner Chappell had recently, they had merged a year before. The person who used to run Warner was gone and they just brought him back and he's putting his team back together. And he was like, huge fan of Nesuhi. The person, my right hand before you was also a Turkish guy who Nesuhi recommended. So I'm going to give you a shot. Internship for 4 months and let's see where it goes. It was paid internship, which I don't think it exists anymore. So I did the internship for 4 months. They renewed me for 4 months. 2 months after that, at the end of my 4 months, one of the girls doing international left. And 2 months after my renewal, the other person left. So my boss came say, okay, it's really soon, but we can either hire more people and deal with personalities, or this is your chance to sink or swim. So I was there for 7 years until I got a job offer from New York.
I love hearing just about how bold you were, just like, calling up Nesuhi like that at the age of 17. And just, I don't know too many 17-year-olds that have that amount of boldness of just like,
Well, we didn't have social media at the time. So your failures were private. So if I had called and he said, no, not interested, nobody was going to know about it.
Interesting. That's true.
Now everything's a little more public. So you think twice before you do things.
Interesting.
Or you should think twice before you do things.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So, okay. But in the 7 years that you were there with Warner Chappell, tell me everything that transpired in there, some of the things that you did.
So it was a lot of deal making, a lot of signing, a lot of meeting with lawyers to represent foreign artists in France. I was doing mainly sub-publishing deals. For the listeners who don't know what a sub-publishing deal is, when you're a publisher, let's say in Canada, you either have to go to France and open your company and deal with all the tax and company accounting issues with France, or you find an existing publisher and you do a sub-publishing deal with them. That means that publisher in France that already has a company set up will represent you. They will take anywhere between 5 and 25%, depending on the deal you make, of your earnings and pay you the rest. So they work as an extension. So that's what we were looking. We were looking for successful artists or promising artists and labels and not labels, publishing companies and catalogs to represent in France. So that's what we did. We were fairly aggressive. We're Warner Chappell. We had the money in the 90s. There were so many records we're selling that it was kind of we were very aggressive. And we would sign a lot of things. And the nice thing in France, because I know that's going to be the next question, nice thing in France is that you get, no matter by law, you have 6 weeks of vacation. And because the music industry is so slow during the summer, July, August, it was mandatory for us to take our vacations 3 consecutive weeks in the summer. And one year, I had a trip scheduled to the US. So I took 5 weeks off. I went to New York. I went to Vegas, LA. I just went all around. But I was also very well rested. So I got back, clean ears, and I found this. We were already at the CDs then. These 3 CD singles that were sent by an independent company in Denmark called Mega Records. There were 3 singles of this brand new band, and I was like, clean ears, good mood, you're not saturated. I was like, this is hooky. This is kind of good. I was like, sure. I was like, yeah, let's make a deal. I was like, I'll give you $5,000 for the first single, and I'll option the next 2 singles. But out of the $5,000, I'll pay you 3, and I want to pay $2,000 for an independent club promotion. Because in France, there's a lot of money to be made, airplay money from clubs. Mm-hmm. So if I invest in club promotion, the money's coming back to my pocket through the airplay, and it adds to the sauce. And no, I signed the single and I optioned the album, if there was an album, because there were just 3 singles. And so we're in paperwork and all that, and they're calling me and saying, okay, we're just doing a deal with Germany. Can you tell us exactly what the territories that France and SACEM has? So we're back and forth, and we're like still doing the administrative things and all that. Meanwhile, the band got picked up by Polydor, and we're still in paperwork. Unfortunately, at majors, paperwork takes time. Mm-hmm. We're still on paperwork, and it was Ace of Base. Did I think it was like going to be the next biggest pop act in the world? No. I thought it was hooky, and I gave them $5,000 and optioned the album. So needless to say, after 50 million copies sold, and I realized that I had no option on the next album, I was like, oh, idiot. You should option the next 5 albums. So obviously there was just so much money thrown at them. And my boss was like, let's go. We got the best. I was like, oh, it's mine. I heard it first. But so let's go. And I'm happy they got the millions they deserve, because that first publishing deal was a very cheap I gave them $5,000 and 2 of them were for club promo.
That's amazing. That's absolutely amazing. What a massive deal that was for you. That's incredible. And so was it shortly after that you went to New York?
Yes.
Okay. Tell me about that moving to New York. What was the idea behind that? Were you approached by a company, or did you have a desire to go to America?
A little bit of both. First, it was very sad, but at like 29, I had hit the ceiling in France. They were never going to make me managing director. I basically was like, I can do lateral moves or start my own company. And I really wanted with my boss to start a company, but he just loved this job security. And it was like, he had too much to lose. He had a family. I get it. But I was like, okay, I've been at the same position for the last 3 years and there's nowhere to go.
Wow.
So, meanwhile, we represented a company called Hit and Run Music that I know you're familiar with,
mm-hmm.
and Michelle de Vries, who I had met at my first meet-em with Warner Chappell. She was managing bands. I was like wet behind the ears. We were like having very serious meetings at meet-em. Now we laugh about it. Because we for some reason, we found ourselves at this like round table that sits 10, but it was just the 2 of us. And we had been friends forever. And when Warner Chappell started representing Hit and Run International, I was like, oh my God, this is great. And with Michelle, we always had very similar ears. We had similar tastes, and we loved the same things. They had a few bands, and this one band in particular at the time called Hidden Persuaders. Then they became Splendor. They were signed to Sony, had one hit, and then everything went away. But when they were Hidden Persuaders, I managed to get them a bunch of festivals in France and in Spain, and they kept on like coming to Europe for these festivals, getting great reviews, and it was adding to the story in America. So I had a really good in with Hit and Run, and I knew all their writers. When they came to France or when I went to London, I would meet them, and I was basically part of the family. And one day we're in Spain with Michelle, and she was like, oh my God, I'm going to go back to, I want to move back to London. And it's going to be so hard to find somebody to replace me in New York because Hit and Run is such a family, such a small and such a tight knit. Honestly, we're like having wine. I was like, I'll do it. And she was like, you'd leave Paris? You've got to realize at 29, I was the ultimate Parisian. Nobody would have ever thought that I would actually get out of Paris. I was like, yeah. She was like, are you serious? I'm like, yes. She was like, I'm going to speak with John and he's going to call you. So 3 weeks later, John calls me, say, hey, if you want the job, it's yours.
Wow.
So they handled all my visa things. They took care of everything. In France, you need to give 3 months notice when you're an executive. So I had 3 months to freak out. And my boss was like, I'm so proud of you, but you're not leaving one day sooner. It was like, I need you to, because 7 years is like, I need really you to prepare it, to like fill us in. It's like, you can't have 2 weeks and just let us be. It's like, you're not gonna, he's like, you're gonna work your 3 months.
Well, because
He gave me my shot.
that's such a massive presence that's exiting the company, you know, and just the amount of experience and everything that's in your brain. Like, you got to find a way to pass that on.
Exactly. So I worked till the last day. And then I took a 2-week holiday and off to New York. And I was there for 13 months. It was chaos. I had never worked at an independent, and especially an independent with a lot of money. So we had the means and we didn't have the load. And there was a lot of partying going. Honestly, I was like, I can't drink this much. I can't drink every lunch. By then I was like, I'm getting tired. And by then Phil Collins left Genesis. They found somebody else to replace. Anyway, the company was in chaos. And one day, John Crawley, who was the managing director of the UK, came to the New York office and basically said, we're closing New York, looked at me, said, Suzan, we just moved you from Paris. So if you want a job, you pack your shit, you go to, can I curse?
Oh,
yeah. Are you going to bleep me?
No, it's totally all right.
You pack your stuff and you go to LA. And for a Parisian who is dreaming of New York, LA is the biggest punishment you can imagine.
Well, I guess New York and Paris are similar in a lot of ways, right?
Yeah, New York is Paris on steroids.
Yeah.
It's more. And then you're like in laid back LA where everybody's laid back, nobody's stressed. It was like, why are you not more angry?
Wow. Had you been to LA before that?
I had been, and I didn't drive, so I hated it. I was a public transportation girl.
Yeah.
I got there, had to get my license. I hated it for 2 years. And after 3 years, I was like, I really would hate to live anywhere else.
Interesting.
Because it was hard to make friends. But once you make friends, they're really good friends. There was no center, so you need to know where to go, how to go, etc. But I loved it.
Were you always living in the hills?
No, my first 5 years I lived in Westwood, the only place where you can walk. I was right by UCLA, and I was like, every year it's getting louder. And I was like, no, every year you're getting older. It's as loud as it's ever been. So after 5 years, I moved to the hills. And that was just in Laurel Canyon. Shelly lived in the hills. And whenever I would like cat sit for her, when she traveled, I was like, oh my God, this is the life. This is where you've got to be.
For those of you that are listening, Shelly being Shelly Peiken, that very good friend of yours and mine, and but you've worked so much with her. Could we hear just a little bit about how you met Shelly? Was that during the Hit and Run days, or was that? So
Shelly, I met with the Hit and Run days, but I actually had met her a couple of years prior to moving to the States, because she had a song that was recorded by a Belgian artist called Axel Red that was a huge hit in France. And we basically ordered I can't remember if it was gold or platinum, but a plaque. And we basically carried it over from Paris and presented it to her. So we had met very casually. No cell phones at the time, so I don't think we even took a picture.
Mm-hmm.
And And after that is when I first started working, and I was still in New York. We did a trip to LA, and she was our main writer in LA. Joey Merrick had signed her. Joey at the time was running the New York office. And we had a nice lunch, and shortly after, actually, she got pregnant. And by the time I moved to LA, she had a 1-month-old. And the nice thing with Shelly Peiken is that she's very sociable. She's very good at pitching her own songs. She knew everybody. She'd take the meetings. But with the baby, she was like, how the hell am I going to do that? I arrived to LA. I have one writer. Got to realize, now at Warner Chappell, I was like, I can work 24/7 and still have angry writers that feel they're not looked after, because they're not. I don't even know they exist, because
there's just so many.
There's just so many, and there's so many hours in the day.
Yeah.
So, so now I'm like, I have time to go deep in the writer's catalog. That was also, I was a little starved there too. I was like, it would be nice to have more. So I was really like digging in, and it was a really good pairing.
You and Shelly have been thick as thieves since the very beginning.
Yes, it was really, it was like a really good basketball team. We would just keep on passing the ball and dunk. It didn't matter who dunked. There was we're like, we need to get that ball in there. And it was also a good time in the record business where records were selling.
Mm-hmm.
So we didn't mind getting an album cut because we would make money. And it was also a time where Shelly was a hot writer. And I realized that sometimes people just cut some of the songs I pitched because it had Shelly's name on it.
Mm-hmm.
At the time, I was like, oh my God, my ears are so good. And later looking back, you're like, yeah, I mean, they were very good songs, but had it had somebody else's name on it, maybe we wouldn't have been through the door.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Shelly, I remember hearing a story about Shelly. Please tell me if this is true, and if it's not, I'll edit it out. I heard that Shelly, at the very beginning of her career, really wanted to get a song on a Taylor Dayne record. And she made a cassette tape with a note on it and found out where Taylor Dayne lives and slid that cassette tape under her front door saying, I would love it if you would record one of these songs. And then Taylor Dayne went and recorded one of those songs. And that is absolutely correct. Is it? Wow.
Yes. And at the time she put 2 songs. The one that she wrote 100% is the one that Taylor picked. She had no publisher on the song. And the album sold millions.
Wow.
Yep, she did that.
Wow. Wow. So you're now in LA. You have one writer for Hit and Run that you're looking after in the LA area. And that's Shelly Peiken. Did it ever become more? Did you sign other writers?
So I had Pam Shane was in London. Remember, this was an English company. Mm-hmm. I don't know if I said that at the beginning, but Hit and Run is a British company. We had writers in London, Pam Shane being one of them.
Yeah.
I saw that she was one of your guests.
Pam's awesome. I love Pam.
And we had a writer we had the band Splendor in New York that were signed to Sony. And we had another band called Southpaw that never got signed. But the main writer in the band ended up, he makes Dido Montel. He writes and produces movies. So writer's a writer.
Yep.
And each time we wanted to sign more, it was like, yeah, I don't know. And by then, with Phil Collins leaving Genesis and trying to reinvent Genesis for a third time, Yeah, we knew that. Like after a while, we're like, okay, we're gonna be for sale very soon. This is not gonna last. We're gonna have a lot of fun because when it first happened and they like closed New York to open LA, they partnered up with music supervisors, so it was part of a big dynamic thing. But it just didn't work out.
The writing was on the wall.
The writing was on the wall. We had a great run. And that's it.
So I know that Hit and Run was coming to an end. How did it happen that you ended up at BMG Music Publishing as the VP of Writer Development?
After Hit and Run closed, I started my own company as a song plugger. And so I was consulting for various companies. And within a year, I got a call from BMG saying, we heard a lot about you. Can we meet? And at the time, I don't know if you're familiar with Scott Francis, lawyer background, and just took the reins, and he was getting the new team together. Danny Strick had just went to Sony, I think. So there were changes. And after Danny left, Clyde Lieberman left. So the whole team had left. Mm-hmm. So Scott Francis was trying to put a team together, and he was asking people around, and it was like, well, what about for songwriters? And they were like, well, Suzan's really good. So honestly, I kind of got hired on the spot.
Amazing.
And I was there for 3 years. It was the worst job I had.
Oh, no.
It was, unfortunately, it's funny because the BMG, when I went back, when it was BMG Rights Management in 2009, that was the best job I had.
Why was it the worst job that you had at the beginning?
Because I had a boss who was constantly asking me if I was sure.
Oh, no.
And at the end of the 3 years, I didn't trust my ears. I was sure of nothing. I was one of those executives who was like, I hated it. I hated it. Because it really broke something that then I was determined not to let anybody near. You have to have your convictions, right or wrong. But there is no being sure. I was like, dude, we're at a blackjack table. And we're doing our best. But nobody's sure of anything. So
that's such a great way to look at that. We're at a blackjack table. I love that. I'm going to take that on if that's all right. That's just, it's so true. Whenever anybody asks me, like, so what do you think's going to happen with this project? That's such a great answer. We're at a blackjack table.
And you know what? I think the odds are on my side, but at the end of the day, I don't know.
Yeah.
If I didn't believe it was on my side,
you wouldn't be sitting at that table.
Yeah. If I have two aces, I'm going to split.
Yeah.
But sometimes I'm just not. Are you sure? No. You're just, God knows. You're playing. We're gambling.
I know. Nothing is sure.
Nothing is sure.
No matter what anybody says, nothing is sure, but you can sit down and you can give it your best. Wow.
Especially in the arts. I mean, right now, there's somebody in their bedroom making music that's going to change all the algorithms that we know. Mm-hmm. So it's not a trajectory. It's a pinball machine. So you never know where it's going to go.
Yeah.
Never know where it's going to go. So, but that was that was bad. That was are you sure? Are you sure? Are you sure? Are you sure?
Just knocked your confidence right out.
It just knocked the confidence out.
Wow, I'm sorry to hear that. But then you went back in 2009 and it was a completely different ballgame.
Oh, different people, different ball game, different approach, phenomenal writers. But that's also what was great is that when I got there, I was there to take care of the writers. I didn't realize that the Pac-Man game was going to become like ridiculous. So we had bought Crosstown Publishing. That had the songwriter Busby, fantastic songwriter.
Yeah.
We had bought, so worldwide, they were buying some like small companies, and I had some fantastic writers to work with, take meetings, go to listen and all that. And then they bought Cherry Lane Music that became our instant New York office. Again, great songwriters. And then it was stage 3, and then Chrysalis, and then you're like, okay, and then it got just so, there were like 5 presidents and no managers. Everybody was a director or VP.
And were you back to that situation where you, like, back in the Warner Chappell days, you just had so many writers?
Not really, because they still had, they would buy smaller companies. Actually, I'm saying not really, no, because when Chrysalis came around, there I was screwed. Because Chrysalis at the time were doing a lot of signing for film and TV. And they were great for film and TV. What's the dream of every film and TV writer? Is to have a pop hit. And all of a sudden, I'm like inundated with mediocre songs. Meanwhile, I'm working with the greats. So yes, it's kind of started getting a lot, but I had to focus on the results and getting the cuts and getting getting things out. I mean, it's I didn't really fully experience it because soon after Chrysalis, I was fired. So I didn't have to have that headache for that long.
Mm-hmm.
But it was fantastic when Sherry Lane was signed. Next thing you know, I'm in the studio with all of Black Eyed Peas, the crew, the people behind that make the music, that were just so unbelievable. I've been around some unbelievably talented people.
What's one of the wildest stories you can tell me of, just like, where you're just pinching yourself that you can't believe you're in the room with?
Oh, I was in the studio. I was in the studio. I was a fly on the wall. I was really in the back when Diplo showed up to pitch tracks to Jean-Baptiste, who was working on, I can't remember whose project. And every track was better than the last, and Jean-Baptiste was passing on them. And I was like, what the fuck? But then when he picked one, he didn't pass on all of them, but there were a few. He's like, yeah, no, that's not going to work. I was like, that was unbelievable.
Wow.
And so that was like, I can't believe I'm witnessing this. And and also pitching songs. You've done it. There's nothing more vulnerable than pitching a song.
Oh, I know.
It feels vulnerable to me, and I didn't even write the songs.
There are so many people that are experts at walking in to pitch a song, and they can sell not just the song, but themselves. Like they just are amazing PR machines that they can just walk in and
That works better when you pitch it to an A&R. It was a producer to another producer pitching.
Right.
So it was, I mean, I think Jean-Baptiste ended up taking 3 or 4 tracks. But he was just playing and they were just so good.
Yeah.
And we're talking, this was 2010. So this was like at the height of Diplo he's changing the game like on a daily basis. So that was an unbelievable moment.
Wow. I'm so curious to know about the workshops, the online workshops that you do. Because I mean, I've been to the website, I've gone through, and it seems incredible. You are changing songwriters' lives and artists' lives around the world with what you're doing. They're
changing their own lives. Hopefully they're using me to do it, but it's not what I do. It's what they do. Listen, the way I got started was, again, Shelly Peiken. Again, it's like when you're independent, like between like gigs and the consultancies, Shelly one day called me and say, "Hey, I've got your next gig." I was like, "Okay, I'm all ears. You're going to start workshops." I was like, "What is that?" She was like, "You're the only person I know who can tell a songwriter that their song sucks and they thank you." She was like, "I have no idea how you do it, but that's a talent. You've got to know that." I was like, "Is that good? Is that bad?" Did she just like, was this a backhanded compliment?
Right.
So she basically tells me, I'm like, "Okay, so start the website." I'm usually very quick at starting things. I was like, "Okay, let's go." And little by little, I just realized that what songwriters need the most is feedback. They don't need me to teach them how to write a song. If they didn't figure it out at 12, they have no business writing songs. The only thing I can do is basically hold the mirror and say, "Yes, it does look your ass look bad. This does not work." And I'm usually really good at saying why it doesn't work. Here's where it lost me. That line has no business. That line doesn't. Your verse and choruses are 2 different songs. They're not flowing. I'm not touched. I don't believe you. You're lying. And now it's funny. I've been doing it for 15 years. And so they were in person, but I find that on Zoom, it really doesn't lose much. It doesn't lose much one-on-one. I occasionally do the group workshops on Zoom, but I don't like it. It's I prefer the one-on-one on Zoom. Mm-hmm. I think if you're going to be in a group situation, it's better to be in person.
I think the having the group be all there together is beneficial to hear other people's songs and hear what the feedback is on that. And maybe they can think, "Oh, that's similar to something that I go through." And it's as far as like being in a group, I think that would be beneficial. But I understand I've taught to both individuals and groups online, and one-on-one is there's nothing better because you can really go deep and you can spend a lot more time with that one individual.
What I mean is that the one-on-one on Zoom, nothing gets lost.
Yeah.
Whereas the group on Zoom, things do get lost. But you're right. I mean, there's something to learn from anywhere you show up.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And again, at the end of the day, it's about feedback, and it's also about how much the writer wants to stay with it and how much they want to push through and how much they want it.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard.
I love that you're doing that. I love that you're giving back. I love that you're helping people around the world, and it's being very successful as well. Look at all that's happened, including the artist that you helped, Milk.
Milk is, you should have her on your podcast. by the way. And if you want me to hook it up, I'm more than happy to.
Yes, please.
Because her producer's also a woman, Adrienne Gonzalez.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that you would be a great match for the brand, and talk about women sisters are doing it
for themselves.
Yeah. Is there a copyright issue here? Do you need to clear the song now?
That's all right. I think if it's under 5 seconds, you're okay.
And it was so out of tune.
That's all right. I can tune you if you want. If I can.
Oh, no.
Right. Oh, I'd love to have Milk. That would be great. But just you helped her, and she went on to do something massive. She had her song that was in the 2017 Women's March, and within 48 hours, it got 15 million views.
She got signed to Atlantic. The second she got signed to a major, everything came to a halt. And the second she got dropped, her career started again.
Yeah. Interesting, isn't it?
She's an activist. So there's a difference. I mean, the recording artist for radio, that's not, it's funny how we all be careful what you wish for.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really important to know where you are, what you want to be, and the life you want.
That sort of goes into my last question for you. Just advice that you would have for anyone that is thinking about getting into this industry in any career path within the music industry.
Have a vision board, but a real one, not a bullshit vision board. Really put down what you want. Actually, 3 things of what you want. Have a vision board. Outside of the vision board, make 3 columns. Put what you want. The second column, put what it takes. And on the third column, put what am I doing? And eventually have that what am I doing in your calendar. Every day you need to be doing something to get what you want. I'll give you an example that's not music business. I want to lose weight. What does it take? Diets and exercise. What am I doing? Eating Twinkies every day. Well, therefore, I don't want it. So if it takes diet and exercise, I go for a walk at 7 p.m. I'm saving money for the gym. So today I went shopping. So basically, you turn the what it takes into a mission. You take the dream, you turn it into a mission with basically actions that go towards that dream. Otherwise, your dream's a pipe dream. So if you want to be working at a label, what does it take? It takes knowing people. It takes having good ears. So go to the conferences, go meet people, go to clubs, hang out at shows. Get your personality out there. Follow record executives on Instagram. I'm not suggesting you stalk them, but make sure that you meet them at one point. So, because people who want to be A&Rs who don't leave their phone or their homes, it's probably not going to happen. So be aware of what it takes. And if you don't know what it takes, ask. There's so many resources. There's so many people, whether like me, like you. I mean, there's so many open forums to be asking questions between Instagram and Facebook and people's websites. Consultancies you can get with almost anybody is at reach today. Ask if that's what you really want. 2, and I'm teaching at Musicians Institute, there are music business programs. Are those programs gonna make you an executive? No. However, those programs have internships. and they can get you one step closer to the people you want to meet. So if you're serious about the dream, start walking. Start walking. Nobody's going to give you a ride. You've got to walk there. And it's hard, it's difficult, but it's simple because it's one step in front of the other. It's you don't want everything at once. You just go and you right place, right time. And call up people. Don't assume people don't want to talk to you. I mean, that was basically my saving grace when I got in. I didn't assume that Nesuhi Ertegun wouldn't talk to me. I called and he did. And if somebody says no, there's always somebody else to say yes.
Had you been that person to think, he doesn't want to talk to me, look at all that you would have missed.
It didn't even cross my mind that he wouldn't talk to me.
Yeah.
When I was telling my friends in high school at 15, when I was like, I want to be in the music business. And I remember when I was like, you know what, all I need is to get a foot in the door. Once I get the foot in the door, I know I'm good. I remember a friend was like, well, how do you know it's going to work out? What if you get your foot in and it doesn't work out? Call it delusional, call it confidence, call it whatever you want. I didn't understand the question. I was like, but of course I'm going to do great once my foot is in there. Because I'll learn. I'm a fast learner. This is what I want. I'll ask the questions. I was like, why would it not work? It just, so it worked for me to have this, like, of course it's going to work. But I worked my ass off at Warner Chappell for 7 years. I worked from 11 a.m. to 2 a.m. every day. Because once the office work was done, it was shows. After the show, it was taking the bands for dinner. And when you're at Warner Chappell, you've got a band every night that's playing somewhere in Paris.
Mm-hmm.
And every morning, my boss was like, it doesn't look good when you arrive at 11 a.m. when everybody else started at 9:30. And I'm like, nobody was at dinner with me at 2 a.m., so I don't care. So for 7 years, we had that conversation. It felt like he had to say it just to look good.
Right.
And I was like, I'm not. But yeah, that's my piece of advice. Sorry, I feel like it was. Do you need me to shorten it up?
Not at all. It was perfect in every way. I'll take it all and use it and soak it in and use it for myself too. I love that idea of putting that chart up on the wall, the 3 columns. That's great. That's really, really great piece of advice, and something that I will keep, as well as we are sitting at the blackjack table. That's incredible. I love that the most out of everything. Little nuggets of information that you can, like, take and use for yourself and put it in your pocket, and just it just makes so much sense. But I've never heard it described that way before. It's absolutely amazing. Suzan, thank you so much from the bottom of my heart for the time that you spent here on this podcast.
Thank you for having me, Rob.
You're a dear,
that
sweet friend.
Lovely.
You're lovely for sharing your time with us and sharing your information, your knowledge, sharing your story, your journey. It's very inspiring just to hear that, just especially how you began at such a young age, and just taking care of a band at the age of 15 and calling up, everybody that you did call up. It's amazing. Everything that you've done. And I'm very, very inspired, and hopefully it inspires other people that listen to this podcast as well.
Thank you for doing this, Rob.
My pleasure.
And let's stay in touch.
Let's get together in Europe somewhere at some point. That would be
awesome. I agree.
So, Suzan, thank you so much from the bottom of my heart. I really appreciate you being here and sharing your knowledge with us.
Thank you for having me. I'm so happy you're doing this.
Thank you. I will continue doing it until they're lowering me 6 feet under. So we'll just keep doing this as long as we can. It's great. Until next time, I'll talk to you soon.
Talk to you soon.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye. Stay tuned for the next episode of Women in the Music Industry, coming soon. Let's embark on this incredible journey together, celebrating the women who are reshaping the music business one note at a time. If you enjoyed hearing this podcast, please take a moment and give it a like, a rating, or a follow. Your support helps immensely. We'll see you next time.